Hello, it is November 12, 2025. It's around 4:30 p.m. and I just finished factory resetting my Windows computer. And I started that process around 2:15, somewhere in that ballpark. And it just finished and wrapped up. But I didn't start recording this because of that. I was getting set up while it was putting on the final touches. So that took about 2 hours, roughly, just over 2 hours and 15 minutes for Windows to factory reset. I did a clean install. And the reason I did a clean install is because yesterday, on November 11, Microsoft released .NET 10, C# 14, and Visual Studio 2026. So, I wanted to do a clean install of my Windows environment, which previously had Visual Studio 2022 and .NET 9 and C# 13. And I like to blow away the entire environment so that there is no residue from the previous version, in this case of development tools, encroaching upon or in some way adding some instability or uncertainty to the new complete version that I want to use and explore. So that's why I blew it away. That's why I did a clean install. And even though it took 2 hours and some change, it was worth it because even though I have not installed Visual Studio 2026 yet, I did install the beta version of it, the insider version, a few months ago, and it looked okay. But I'm going to install that today, and I've already installed .NET 10 on my Linux machine. That took every bit of 30 seconds. So the install experience between Linux and Windows when it comes to installing Microsoft tools is very drastic, very dramatic. And so I put .NET 10 on my Linux machine. Now, I didn't blow away my Linux environment like I did the Windows environment because Linux is a different situation. You can go in there with a scalpel and be guaranteed of success. So that's what I did, is I was able to fully remove .NET 9 from my Debian 13 environment. And after I wiped all that away, and I did do a restart, I then installed .NET 10, which has official and complete support for Linux. In this case, for the Debian track of Linux. So, what's the big deal about all of this? And I do have a few notes here. So I just want to cover a few things for those that are curious. And basically, .NET 10, unlike .NET 9, is what's called a LTS or a long-term release. It's going to be officially supported for 3 years over a longer span of time. So you got 3 years of a stable .NET. And .NET 9 is stable, and you can still use it today. But I would prefer to be on an LTS. Now, I will jump off of an LTS and get onto an STS, which .NET 9 is, where there's some huge benefits. And there was, for me, a huge benefit to jump off of .NET 8 and get onto 9, because for me, and what I was looking at and what I was exploring, .NET 9 had substantially higher performance than .NET 8. So those performance improvements carry over to .NET 10 with the addition of a more stable grounding in terms of longevity. So I am pleased with that, and they have ramped up performance, at least according to the official release notes on .NET 10. They have ramped up the performance. So the situations where you would have lower performance in certain code paths will be narrower. So there will be much broader performance improvements in .NET 10. And so that's the number one thing that I'm excited about. And so you do have this option in .NET 10 with C# 14 where you can write C# code and just run it. You can run it off of the .cs file. And so you don't need a project. And this is interesting for quick prototyping. It's very interesting for doing a one-off code iteration where you need to test some things out, and where in the past you might build what you would call a temporary C# project, a project file, and then add your .cs files to it just to isolate some changes that you're trying to work on before you reintegrate them into the main project that you're working on. You can speed that process up a little bit by just running the .cs file. Now, there's a little bit of what you would call indirection or trickery going on, where they actually are doing the full official things that you do with C# files and projects. They're just doing it behind the scenes now and doing it faster so that you don't have to go through all of those steps to do it. So there's some very interesting use cases for that, but it does not make it JavaScript. It does not make it Python. It doesn't make it like this thing where you're just going to rapidly throw out a script and do the same things that you would do with JavaScript and Python. It's not that, but it's close. And so there will be some interesting usages of C# in DevOps and production scenarios, production support scenarios, using this feature alone. And so with C# 14, there's better support for the null conditional operators. And so you're going to see some of the workaround codes that you'd have to write, some slight boilerplate removed. So there's going to be a little bit more condensing of that. You got this field keyword for properties that is going to also potentially eliminate something that we have seen over the last 25 years with C#, since its inception, where you had these what is called backing fields that allowed you to have very granular control over properties from within a class. And you still retain that, but you can do it in a more elegant way. So at least that's what it sounds like. We'll have to see how that works out in practice. And then you got partial constructors and partial events. And so that helps you with code generation. That helps you with when you're splitting up classes and other module types across multiple files. And then one of the ones I'm looking forward to is the changes they've made in ASP.NET Core 10. And so I'm working on a website right now that is defined in ASP.NET Core. And so having the improvements in the runtime is going to be beneficial to me. And my ASP.NET website is very minimalist in terms of how it's built and constructed, the core of it. And so it's very minimalist. And so one of the things that I'm looking forward to is the local host improvements for developer iteration. And I'm still deciding if I'm going to really go all in on Blazor. I like the idea of Blazor. It reminds me of Silverlight, which I used extensively, and I enjoyed Silverlight to an extent. One of my criticisms of Silverlight was that it wasn't as robust as WPF that it was based on, but from what I understand, Blazor is going to, Blazor really gets you around all of that. And there are people that are, they're less savvy with ASP.NET. They found ASP.NET less approachable, and they find Blazor more approachable. It's kind of an odd twist there. So you might see the proliferation of Blazor in enterprise environments, and it might actually eke out into areas where you would normally see React and Angular used. Entity Framework Core 10, they added a first-class vector type, and I recently got my certification in Oracle Vector Search, and I understand that Azure DB has a vector data type, and these vector data types are used in artificial intelligence and machine learning applications. And you don't necessarily have to use vector data types in those applications. As I explained in my previous video, there are a multitude of uses for the concept of a vector. And so I've been using vectors for a number of years, and it's one of the principal concepts in Euclidean geometry and applied computational geometry in general when we're talking about things as benign as two-dimensional user interfaces, your basic squares, triangles, and circles, and the translation of those geometric figures on an angular plane. So there is a potential case that I haven't seen widespread where you could use Entity Framework in conjunction with a user interface framework, and with vectors you can do some very novel and neat things that are not just clever, but they may potentially streamline the union or the integration between the back end and the data, as well as how the user interface materializes that data. So both materializing the user interface and materializing the data for that user interface. But the jury is still out on that. And you also have JSON, which helps with that process as well. And there's been some improvements with JSON in .NET 10. And in particular, you have some great features for JSON in Entity Framework 10. So you have some improvements with MAUI. I don't actually mess with MAUI. I don't emphasize that at all because I think that Avalonia is a better alternative to MAUI. And for those areas where you might consider using MAUI in mobile environments, I think that the alternatives, the first-party alternatives, are superior and would be a better way to go. So that's not to say there isn't an audience for MAUI. There absolutely is. But it's just something that, in that case, I see more of a personal preference, more of an ideological alignment issue there, more so than a hard requirement like ASP.NET. You want to do web development using .NET, you want to use ASP.NET. But if you want to do desktop development and mobile development using .NET, well, that's not so clear-cut, and there are some good reasons to prefer alternatives over some of the options that have been emphasized. And so that's some of the high-level aspects with the .NET 10 and C# 14 release. One of the things I want to touch on is I want to look at these different worlds of Windows and Linux, right? So if you watch my videos about me and my journey with Linux, you'll know that I'm all in on Linux and I'm all in on open source. So the thing is that sometimes people can watch what I talk about and they can get a little confused. One day he's talking about Linux and one day he's talking about Windows. Well, here's the thing. There are certain applications that I have that are Windows based, and what I do with Windows is primarily remain familiar with that entire environment. because that is the environment that I started with. So I actually started with MS-DOS. So I started in the command line environment, and then my next jump was Windows 3.1. So I started with MS-DOS and Windows, and I have nearly 35 years of muscle memory with MS-DOS commands that you can still run today. They're still valid. They're still 100%. And in some cases, they're preferable to using even PowerShell. And so I have 35 years of muscle memory, and I work in day job environments that have no Linux at all. So it remains useful to me to be read up and literate in Windows. But at home and for my side projects and the things that I work on, it's Linux based. And so what I see with Microsoft.NET in particular, I see a tool there that has a level of focus to it, that has quality, that is, it does not suffer from the deficiencies that I've seen in Windows. The blue screens, the driver conflicts, the crashes, userland issues, kernel space issues, security issues, all of that. All of that stuff that, in part makes me want to take a real, makes me want to shy away from Windows. I don't see all of those types of issues in the .NET space. Same company, two totally different outcomes and paths. So I can totally distance myself from Windows while at the same time embracing .NET, which runs in Linux. And if .NET did not run in Linux, I wouldn't use it at all. So that's why I invested 13 years in C++, C, and all kinds of alternatives, because I have options. I don't actually have to use .NET. But the reason why I use .NET in Linux now is that it has higher performance than some of the other tools that I would be looking at. It has higher productivity. Now, if it just had higher productivity, but it didn't have the performance, I still wouldn't use it. So because it has performance, and we have productivity, and we have ways of streamlining the development of software and do it in a way that is compatible with open source, then I'm good to go. So that's why I do that. Okay, so that's my explanation. I know I'll have to explain that again. That was a bit much, but that's where I am on my journey with that. And so I see some benefits for software development in the Linux space using Microsoft.NET and pairing it with platforms such as Avalonia and using ASP.NET in a minimalist type of way, and taking advantage of Entity Framework with SQLite and PostgreSQL, and in some rare occasions, SQL Server as well as Oracle. And so that's how I look at that. And, when it comes to desktop applications, then you have Avalonia, which runs on not only Linux, but it runs on Windows and it runs on Mac, right? So you have, what is the ideal? You have higher performance, more streamlined and productive software development, and you have true cross-platform that can be tuned and tweaked by the open source community at large should something weird happen with the official Microsoft toolkit. So, I see some very good, I see a very good road ahead with .NET. And so that is some of the things that I have going on there. And I was going to showcase the install of Visual Studio 2026 and all of that on my Windows laptop, but it took so long to set up Windows again and do it fresh that pretty much the day is gone. And I'm like, okay, let me take a pass on that for now, and I'll just do my setup and all of that later tonight, and while I'm multitasking with some other things, so that I have a productive part of my day. But I do want to show some of the things with Linux and .NET that I found trivially interesting, because sometimes the simplest and most boring things are the most important things, such as uh, just, okay, I built, coded, and compiled this program for .NET 9. All right, can I just flip the switch over to .NET 10? Well, let's see. Like I said, I am in Debian 13, and what I want to do is set up .NET 10 and have it compile, use it to compile my software applications. So let's list the SDKs on the system, and we see that we have .NET 10 on here, and we are good to go. So everything was pretty straightforward from that point of view. So in some of my existing projects, we have the familiar directories of obj and bin. So you go into bin and you see that it's .NET 9. And these are the executables that were generated through the C# compiler. So I just want to blow all of this away, just delete it permanently, and we want to recompile under .NET 10. And so I do a .NET restore that helps with any NuGet packages, NuGet caches, and other configuration particulars in the project. And it's also going to do a preliminary build of the program. And this is a good way to root out issues. And so it's taking its time here because it's looking for .NET 9 and it cannot find it. And so I have an error message here that shows that it can't compile and it cannot find .NET 9. That's what it's expecting. And as you saw, we deleted the obj and bin directories, right? So we deleted the intermediate files as well as the final executable files. So there was no residual issues from that point of view. But the fix is very simple. When you have defined your project in a very simple way, then the fixes tend to be very straightforward. In this case, we're just going to make this one little micro change. We're going to change that 9 to a 10, and then that's it. That's all you have to do. Change that 9 to a 10. And once you do that, you can run the restore, and then you can do .NET build, press enter, and it's ready to go. And just like that, the executables are built. And so the last time I had built these programs was October 5th, right? So it's been just over a month ago. And so let's see what the new executables look like. So I'm pretty pleased that we have made this progress and we've gotten this far with it. And that's pretty much what we want to do in terms of how we build our software applications. We want a streamlined process. We want streamlined problem resolution, and we want things to be very straightforward. So there we are. Instead of .NET 9, it's .NET 10, and there are the executables. It's the same executables, but they've been recompiled with improvements. And so I had 3 programs that I had recently built, some that I had built last month that I wanted to just do a very straightforward upgrade, right? So I want to do the same thing here. Let's repeat the process because, the first time you may just be lucky. But can we repeat this process 3 times? And since we know what we need to do straight out the bat, change from Framework 9 to Framework 10, right, as our target framework, then we just open a terminal and we'll just compile it, and everything should go the way that we expect. I do a .NET restore and then a .NET build, and everything is good to go. So we have success here. Let's just make a quick visual glance and confirm, and we see that we have everything in place. And yeah, so let's see. I got a little, I got a little misdirected there. I right-clicked the wrong thing, so let me get back on track here. And there we go. Let's see. This should be the right one. And there we are. So let's get rid of these two directories. And then let's go ahead and make modifications to the CSproj file. And, you know, to me, I would probably change this in the future so that it's a little bit more flexible, so that the target framework does not have to be changed. And so I may do that at some point, but that isn't a priority for me right now. But yeah, so just with that little small trivial change, everything is good to go. And I could not be more pleased, because the majority of the projects that I build for myself, I try to keep them in as simple a configuration as possible. So that is what .NET on Linux looks like using the command line. And if you're using Debian, it's really as simple as sudo apt install .NET-SDK 10.0. All you have to do is type that, press enter, and it installs .NET right there on Linux, right? So you do have to add the Microsoft repository, and Microsoft has all the information for how you do that. Or you could just ask ChatGPT, and it will actually script it out for you, and you copy and paste, and you're ready to rip and roll. But since I already had .NET 9 installed, all I did was I removed all the .NET 9, and then since I already had the Microsoft repository loaded in my sources, my Debian sources, then all I had to do was type sudo apt install .NET-SDK 10.0, and there it was. .NET 10 was on there, and I was ready to rock and roll. So that is my window into .NET, and I'm glad that we have .NET 10 here, because I do think that it is like the real formative .NET for the next couple of years, and it's the baseline. And it may not make like major news anywhere, but in terms of like how the job market for .NET looks like, how .NET applications look like over the next couple of years, this is a version that has what I see as all the right elements: the performance, the stability, the widespread support for various operating systems, and we have some of the what you would call the primitives for artificial intelligence, as well as computational geometry in a different way. And we have a broad set of tools with Visual Studio Code, as well as improvements in the .NET CLI that will allow you to build .NET applications more productively and put applications out there that have less questions, or we hope less production bugs from the standpoint of the tooling that's been provided. So that's my take on everything, and I hope this finds you well. And until I see you again, I'll see you again.